many refugees, not so many, because we know the number of members of Ahmadiyya. But all the refugees who are accepted in Norway from Pakistan, they are Ahmadiyya. And I would like to be humble in my question, but to ask about the situation for the Ahmadiyya in relation to the Pakistani regime.
The situation of Ahmadis in Pakistan is a complex situation which presents difficulty for foreign observers to fully understand and penetrate below the surface, because it's a multiple complicity. It's a religious issue which has been exploited politically and always stands in danger of being exploited throughout the political turmoils in Pakistan. So whenever a regime fears of becoming unpopular, the only scapegoat they find to redeem some of their popularity is Ahmadiyya community. So they take more stern measures and more stern measures against them, so that the illiterate public, which is agitated by an orthodox Muslim scholar who lives in the past centuries, not in the present time, such public as is being agitated by such scholars is exploited now politically by governments. In Ahmadiyya case, an ordinance has been passed which has done already enough damage permanently to all Ahmadis' rights to live honorably as equal citizens in Pakistan. That ordinance is known as Ordinance 20, promulgated by late General Zia when he was an absolute dictator. That ordinance deprived Ahmadis of all their civil rights to express what they believe themselves to behave in the manner they believe they should behave, to convey the message to others by word of mouth or by expression. And this ordinance goes so far as to declare that Ahmadis being non-Muslims in the sight of the government, so if an Ahmadi even behaves like a Muslim, it is a crime liable to be punished by 3 years rigorous imprisonment, which is an unbailable offense, and also confiscation of property to no limit. Now this is the sword of Damocles which is hanging over every Ahmadi threat since then. But more is yet to come, and more is coming. Of that I'll say later after the translation, please.
Det var jeg utfordret på at jeg skulle oversette, men det er greit. Det gjelder jo forfølgelsen i Pakistan, som jeg selv nevnte litt grann om i innledningen, og kalifen viste til det som ble kalt for Ordinance 20, altså lov nummer 20, som ble innført under general og president Zia-ul Haq, den tid han var nærmest, du må kunne si, diktator i Pakistan, i 1984. Han omkom jo senere ved en forsagt tragisk flyulykke hvor mange andre også omkom. Det var noen nok som håpet at den skulle fjernes etter ham, men den loven blir fulgt, og den kan medføre straff med inntil 3 års fengsel for en Ahmadi som oppfører seg som en muslim. Vi tror jo at vi er muslimer, vi sier at vi er det, men loven i Pakistan sier at hvis du er Ahmadi, og du oppfører deg som en muslim, du bruker islamske uttrykk, du oppfører deg på andre vis, utfører seremonier som en muslim, og så videre, så kan du bli trukket for retten og bli idømt 3 års fengsel og ubegrensede bøter.
Now, to add more to already very severe legal measures against Ahmadis, first of all, I remind you that all that dictatorial ordinance has been made a part of Pakistan legislation now. It's no longer an ordinance passed by a dictator. It is a part of Pakistan legislative code and legal system. Secondly, to add more possibilities of persecuting and punishing Ahmadis, a law was promulgated which read that anybody who insults or is known to have insulted the holy founder of Islam is liable to be punished by death plus rigorous imprisonment for life as well. Now, this ordinance was aimed at no one other than the Ahmadis, because they believe that the Ahmadis' faith, the Ahmadis' fundamental article of faith which differentiates them from the other Muslims is one of them is this, that they believe in continuity of prophethood, in the sense that a subordinate prophet to Prophet Muhammad can still come. This is the dividing line between us and the Orthodox Muslims. Now, according to the Mullah, the Orthodox Muslim scholar, this is an insult to the Prophet to declare that a prophet can come after. So, in one of the cases in the Sessions Court in Peshawar, in Northwest Province, the judge declared his judgment that the Ahmadi who admitted in the court that according to his belief a prophet may come, he should be imprisoned for 10 years rigorous imprisonment and his property should be confiscated. And then he was so ill-treated in the jail that if I tell you the story, some of the weak-hearted people will start crying. 3 people's work was enforced on him. He had to work day and night, the hardest possible labor, not for one person, but for 3 persons. Now, this goes on in the country everywhere, but the mullahs are not still satisfied. The Supreme Sharia court, that is the religious court in Islam, in Pakistan, has now made, not only now made, it made a demand earlier on the Legislative Assembly that the second alternative punishment of imprisonment must be removed from the law. There should only be one punishment, hanging by death, for anyone who insults the Holy Prophet. What insult means is left open and confused. It is anybody's decision. So if any case goes to the court now, it will not be a question of 10 years rigorous imprisonment. It would be a question of death penalty. And if it is a crime to believe that God can speak to people even after the Holy Prophet of Islam, then every Ahmadi commits that crime. So it's only a question of chance on whose head the sword falls.
I det første delen han sa, så da jeg skulle oversette, hoppet over et punkt, og det han viste til det velkjente faktum at hvis det problemer internt et sted, så prøver man å finne syndebukker. Og for min egen del må jeg kunne vise til for eksempel jødenes situasjon i Tyskland i sin tid, hvor man lett prøver å skyve skylden over på andre. For å avsvekke oppmerksomheten mot egne problemer. Det som ble beskrevet nå, det var jo ytterligere en forklaring på den bestemmelsen som gitt i Pakistan, som opprinnelig da var en forordning gitt av en diktator, men som senere blitt en del av den vanlige pakistanske lov. Og den er blitt senere utvidet slik at enhver som fornærmer den hellige profeten, og for oss, eller for muslimer, så i begrepet den hellige profeten, så mener man Muhammed. Og når jeg som muslim sier Muhammed eller Muhammad, så legger jeg egentlig til Allahs fred og velsignelse være med ham. Enhver som fornærmer den hellige profeten skal dømmes med døden, dømmes til døden, eller eventuelt livsvarig fengsel, som ytre strafferamme. Nå er man inne på et kjernepunkt, fordi egentlig denne loven kunne lyde generell, men egentlig så er den rettet mot Ahmadi-muslimene, fordi her går vi på et kjernepunkt i ulik oppfatning når det gjelder tro. Et skille mellom den store mengden av muslimer og Ahmadi-muslimene er at den store mengden sier at Muhammed var den siste profet. Han er Khataman Nabiyin, profetenes seier. Og så sier de, det betyr at han var den siste profet. Vi sier, jo, han er Khataman Nabiyin, han er profetenes seier, men i det ligger det at han er den siste lovbringende profet, og det kan komme profeter etter ham, fordi vi kan ikke tro at Gud sluttet å snakke til menneskene for 1300-1400 år siden.
Although there is so much to be said, but I know the time is short, I'll only add a small thing to what I have already stated. What people from the outside world observe is much less than the tip of the iceberg. What goes on unreported in the press and unproved legally is far more than what is being seen on the surface. Thousands of Ahmadis in services have been discriminated against. Thousands who were given excellent reports by their officers in the army, in civil services, that you are the best officer so far. When the chance of their promotion comes, they say, sorry. They don't give him in writing, because you are an Ahmadi, we are not going to promote you. But invite him to their office. They say, are you ready to change your faith for the sake of a higher job? Of course the answer is no. He said, then what have you come to me for? Nothing can be done for you. And in this way, there are thousands of officers in the military and in the civil services which become so dejected, so despondent at what's happening, that they prefer to live in a free country rather than in a country in which there is a full record of excellent reports in their services, but when the chance of promotion comes, another inferior person is promoted instead of him. A discrimination is carried out in all educational institutions. To a degree, you can imagine what injury it would cause to young students whose utensils, plates, etc. are separated. They are made to sit separately on another table, not to sit as they consider themselves to be superior Muslims. They say, you have no right to mix with us, your plates are uncouth and filthy. No Muslim would eat in the plates used by you. While when they come to Europe, they use all the plates where swine is being eaten and use all the goblets where wine is being drunk. Nothing happens to their faith. But in Pakistan, the Ahmadi students are treated as less than scheduled castes are treated in India. Now this is not reported. There is no evidence. Which non-Ahmadi would come forward and say, this is what we are going to do, or we are doing to them. So the world outside does not see what is happening inside. Why should people leave the country unnecessarily? They are the same people who, prior to my departure from Pakistan, which happened about 7 years ago, they never came to other countries. Very few, very small trickle. They did not want to. So this is the compulsion. The untold story is far more tragic than the told story.
Jeg må få med avslutningen av det for at Det finnes en egen religiøs domstol i Pakistan, og denne har sendt en henvendelse til den lovgivende forsamling om at muligheten for å gi dem med fengselsstraff for slik som å fornærme profeten, at den skal fjernes, slik at det bare skal være dødsstraff igjen. Så nevnte kalifen nå masse av de bitte små ting som ikke er så dramatiske, og som folk egentlig hører lite om, men for eksempel det at i studentkantiner, så for amalier som er studenter, de må sitte for seg selv, de får ikke lov å sitte sammen med de andre. Det tallerkenene som de spiser blir satt for seg selv, så at de ikke skal forurense eller skitne til de samme troende muslimer og så videre. Dette er jo ting som vi kjenner til fra andre deler av verden, opp gjennom vår egen historie også. Men slike ting opplever da tusenvis og egentlig millioner av amali-muslimer i Pakistan da.
I hope you have covered all the things I said. Yes, please.
May I come back to the first question which
Yes.
the other gentleman asked?
Yes.
You said the rights as a citizen, for instance, the right to vote.
Yes.
If
Very interesting question. Yes.
they were deprived of that vote, was it also not possible for them, after the death of
That's right.
Ziasat,
Yes, correct.
to form a political party and express their opinion, maybe in the years, I think, after 87?
Yes, you are absolutely right in partly suggesting in the form of this question that I should have also said this. You know, there is a very clever way of preventing Ahmadis from doing two things. Number one, using their right to vote politically in every sphere of political activity. And second, to normally go to other countries like other Pakistanis can. What they have done is, very cleverly, they have employed the condition that anyone who wants to be listed as a voter must sign papers. And those papers are of two types. Some papers are for Muslims only. And there, in those papers, every Muslim voter in Pakistan has to declare in writing that the founder of the Ahmadiyya community was a liar, an impostor, a false man who has nothing to do with truth. And I swear to this that this is my belief. Then, only then he can become registered as a Muslim voter. And in the non-Muslim form, they have to deny the oneness of God and the truth of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They cannot write the fundamental article of Muslim faith because they are considered to be non-Muslims. So no Ahmadi in the entire country is eligible to vote. So he is deprived from all political activities. He cannot form any pressure group, he cannot pursue others. If there were votes, of course, he could go to some possible future prospective member of the assembly and say, here are my votes, you please do me a favor in return. No more. As far as the visiting foreign countries is concerned, this is again community which has happened in Pakistan. Every passport of an Ahmadi shows that he is an Ahmadi. Ahmadi Qadiani is stamped large. The result is that all Western embassies refuse visas to them. How the small trickle still manages? That is because wherever such measures are taken, corruption takes over and new devious ways are invented. So in all Western embassies there are corrupt officers who would be bribed by some agents, not by Ahmadis, by some agents with whom they are at one, they understand. So just for the sake of visa, some Ahmadis have to pay the exorbitant price of 75,000 per person. while the air cost for the air ticket cost is 15,000. Some have to sell all their property just for the sake of getting a visa. So this is also the unnoticed misery. But one thing which you can positively see is that no other country in the world shows the religion of the person carrying the passport except the Pakistani passport. And there other sects are not mentioned, only Ahmadis sect as Ahmadi is mentioned and stamped.
Det var spørsmål om blant annet dette med å registrere seg som velgere, og der har man I Pakistan spesielle regler. Det nesten farlig å snakke om sånt med politikere til stede, men det vel litt neppe fare for forholdet lett, ikke noe fare for at vi skal få slike forhold her. I Pakistan en måte å hindre ahmadiene på, det at for å velge så må du registreres som velger. Og for å bli registrert må du enten så må du undertegne et skjema som formålsskyldig, og det skjemaet inneholder en masse skjellsord mot grunnleggerne av vår menighet, tar avstand fra ham og sier at han var en falskner og en løgner, og så må du undertegne på det. Den som ahmadi vil selvfølgelig ikke kunne undertegne noe slikt. Da det bare et annet skjema, og det andre skjema, det for ikke-muslimer, og det tar avstand fra tanker om en Gud, og det fornekter Muhammed som profet. Og det kan vi jo da heller ikke undertegne. Altså kan vi virkelig undertegne det ene eller det annet, og ahmadi-muslimer I Pakistan kan av den grunn, finner av den grunn ikke å kunne stemme. Det gjelder valg. Så gjelder det dette med pass. Pakistan det eneste landet I verden der religionen står innført I passet, og dette med religion gjelder bare ahmadi. Når det gjelder ahmadi så stemples det med store bokstaver at vedkommende ahmadi. Og som Carl Itten sa, når vestlige ambassader ser noe slik, så utsteder de I alle fall ikke visum. Men så finnes det I Pakistan også korrupsjon, og det store agenter som bestikker, og på den måten så kan også ahmadi-muslimer via disse agentene få visum. Men prisen da I Pakistan for slike visum 75.000 rupees, mens flybilletten til Europa 15.000.
Please. Thank you. Jazakumullah. Yes, please.
My name is Audu Muhammad. The first part of my question is a little bit belated, but I think it's pertinent. It concerns the Gulf War, which has ended, and every peace-loving person on earth is relieved. Well, the fighting itself has ended, but then the result of it is the second part of the question I'm going to ask. Before the fighting and during the fighting, Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, did call for an Islamic jihad against the Western world. Now, the question I want to ask there is, did Saddam Hussein have the right, as a Muslim, to ask other Muslims to go on a jihad on behalf of his country? That is the first part of the question. And do you confirm what he did, or do you deny it? The second aspect of my question is that...
Take it easy and go part by part.
Okay, then I will...
All right? Yes. You first translate the question.
Det var et spørsmål om Golfkrigen, som var slutt, hvor til da ble sagt, og så hvor til da Carl Itten spurte, den egentlig slutt? Men selve kamphandlingene det jo slutt på. Og I forbindelse med denne krigen så oppfordret Saddam Hussein, Iraks president, til jihad, det som vanligvis til på norsk oversettes med hellig krig. Og det spørs da, var det riktig og kalle til hellig krig på dette grunnlag.
You see, in politics, everything is right. In religion, many things are wrong. The question is, you should see it from a different vantage point. Why did you not ask the same question to yourself or anybody when Saddam Hussein declared holy war against Iran and Khomeini declared holy war against Iraq? If these two presidents had the authority to declare holy wars against Muslim states, why can't they have the authority to declare holy war against a Christian state or a non-religious, a secular state? So the authority is derived from the same force from which earlier Iraq derived its authority to declare their war with Iran as holy, and Khomeini drew his authority to declare war against Iraq as holy. Obviously there was no authority. Both wars were unholy. So the wars are unholy. Only a license is being attempted to be taken. Even America took the same license of a holy war in Afghanistan from Muslim clerics. Now you will be surprised, but this is exactly what the Reagan administration did. I have myself heard the interview of a high officer of State Department who once, when confronted with the question, are you not afraid that another Vietnam will be created for you in Afghanistan, answered, no, this is a holy war we are fighting. So if America can join the holy war of Muslims against Russia, imagine what may happen in the world of politics. So what is politics is politics. Religion is only a scapegoat.
Mujahedin i Afghanistan i kampen mot Sovjet.
You see, have you told them that they declared, the American high official declared, it's a holy war.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So if Americans can fight a Muslim holy war against other Muslims of Afghanistan and some Russians, why can't Saddam do the same? Any other question, please? Your second question, please.
The second part of the question stems from the first. As a result of this call for a jihad, I think that everybody here will bear me out that the Western world hasn't taken this kindly. As a result of which we heard recently in the UK, Muslims were denied jobs just by mere fact of their names. And I'm even wondering whether I should change my own name because I might lose my job. What are the spiritual leaders like you and others all over the world doing to explain to the Western world that just by being a Muslim or believing in God does not mean that you are fighting a jihad?
You can wake up a man who is asleep, but you can't wake up somebody who is already awake. The Western media is doing it consciously. I have been traveling far and wide, giving press interviews, fully covered by reporters from all over. Yet, because I did not support Khomeini, because I did not support Saddam Hussein, so my news was blacked out. They wanted thrill, anti-Muslim thrill. Any Muslim trying to defend the cause of Islam against a Muslim state is blacked out. I went to America, I went to Canada, to Holland. Very few newspapers had the honesty and the courage to report me condemning these wrong views attributed to Islam. The rest just blacked out. So you are fighting against a system, a willful system of bringing bad name to Islam. It politically suits some powers. So your changing the name will only hurt you further.
Det ble av spørgeren vist til de problemer som muslimer her i Vesten fikk i forbindelse med Gulfkrigen. Det ble sett på med mistanke, og folk mistet jobbene sine. Han nevnte eksempler fra Storbritannia, men vi vet jo her at folk her i Norge opplevde det samme. Så ble spurt hva gjør islamske ledere, slik som kalifen, i forbindelse med dette. Og kalifen svarte at man prøver å gjøre noe, men vestlige medier bryr seg ikke om det. Han har selv talt imot Khomeini, han talte imot Saddam Hussein, men det er ikke interessant nok. For de er ikke med på å styrke dette bildet man gjerne vil, det negative bildet man gjerne vil ha av islam. Så presse eller medier, han rettet ganske sterk kritikk mot mediene. Det er ikke interessant nok, og det faller ikke inn i det mønstret som de gjerne vil vise fram. Det at det finnes ansvarsbevisste religiøse ledere som ikke ønsker krig hverken på den ene eller annen parts premisser.
Thank you. Yes, please. Any other question, please? Yes. Yeah. After another hand raised from behind. After there's another hand raised before you. So, if you permit me, we'll return to you afterwards, please. Thank you.
नहीं मैं उर्दू नहीं बोलूँगा. I was curious to know. My name is Finn. हाँ? नहीं मैं उर्दू नहीं बोलूँगा.
अच्छा मैं क्या उर्दू में बोलूँगा.
अच्छा अगर आप चाहें तो फिर हम आपकी
नहीं आप बेशक
मानेंगे आपकी बात को.
अपनी मर्जी से जो चाहें ज़ुबान इस्तेमाल फरमाएं.
नहीं सबको समझना चाहिए ना तो. I was curious to know what is the status of the Ahmadiyyas in other Muslim countries than Pakistan, and what is their status in India? Do they have similar troubles there, or is it only in Pakistan?
You see, our troubles are only in such countries where regimes are dictatorial and totalitarian, and they claim to be the representatives and monopolizers of Islam. In all such regimes, even if when they disagree with each other, Ahmadis find themselves in deep difficulty. Jordan, for instance, supposed to be the most modern of the Arab world, there only last year something heinous happened which I could never expect from Jordanian people to have tolerated. A Sharia court decided against an old Ahmadi who was about 75 years old, that because of his belief, his wife stands divorced. He didn't divorce, the court divorced his wife and said if he returns to that house, he should be stoned to death for committing the crime of adultery, intimating with some woman who doesn't belong to him. And then his property should be confiscated. Ever since, that man is living in exile and he cannot return to Jordan. So these things are happening in other countries as well. But Ahmadis from there do not in general migrate because it is only a question of occasional sporadic decisions. What is happening in Pakistan is a set policy of the government which pursues this policy and continuously supports anti-Ahmadi elements. So the problem there has acquired a different dimension. Otherwise, There are similar problems in other Arab countries as well. In Syria, in Abu Dhabi, in Bahrain less, but Abu Dhabi much more, and Kuwait. When they come to know that some employee of theirs is an Ahmadi, even if he has been serving them with absolute honesty for 20 years, he is thrown out of the country, having confiscated their property, their, all their rights, etc., are withheld from him, and he is just told to leave. This is happening today. But Ahmadis do not complain, because, as I have told you, it happens sporadically here and there. In Pakistan, it's a different story altogether.
Jeg antar ut fra innledningen
After
det
this.
som ble sagt, at det var universitetslærer Nurten som talte. Det stemmer. Og det var et spørsmål om situasjonen for ahmadier i andre land, for eksempel India. Og det generelle svaret fra Khalifa var at diktatoriske regimer som hevder å representere islam, det er de som undertrykker mest. Så nevnte han et konkret eksempel fra Jordan, som var kommet litt overraskende, fordi Jordan ses på som et noe mer åpent samfunn. Men forleden år så var det en 75-åring som av den religiøse domstolen var blitt påtvunget skilsmisse. De sa at hans hustru nå var skilt fra ham på grunn av at han var ahmadi. Så domstolen sørget for skilsmissen og sa da at om han nærmet seg hennes hus, så ville han bli steinet til døde på grunn av utroskap, eller det at han prøvde å nærme seg en fremmed kvinne. Det er ikke akkurat slik som styrker islam, må jeg si, men det var en personlig kommentar. Og han nevnte også land som Syria, Abu Dhabi og Kuwait. Og fra Kuwait så nevnte han folk som kanskje har arbeidet som tjenere i 20 år, aldeles prikkfritt, men hvis man får vite at de er ahmadi, så blir de uten videre sparket ut av landet, og alt de eier blir beslaglagt. Men, sa kalifen, vi hører lite om det, vi klager ikke, fordi dette er bare sporadiske tilfeller. Mens i Pakistan så er undertrykkelsen hele veien fra toppen, så den er mer intens.
Yeah, this question has not primarily a political tendency, but a religious tendency. And we know that there are many directions within the Muslim religion. The Shia, the Sunni, the Bora, the Ahmadiyya, and we also have refugees for different reasons from other directions. And I would like to know whether it is so that the Ahmadiyya religion, or part of the Muslim religion, is awakening aggression because of its that it is more open to all different religions, like the Baha'i. The Baha'i is another direction which has been persecuted in Persia, first of all.
Only in Persia.
And I think that maybe the reason for this persecution is the belief that it contains all other religions within. And I wonder now, my question is, whether Ahmadiyya religion also meets the same kind of aggression because of the same attitude.
First question, please.
Det var et spørsmål om, så langt jeg oppfattet det, spørsmål om årsaken til den aggresjon man også her føler, altså blant andre islamske grupper her, føler mot ahmadierne, om det skyldes ahmadiernes større åpenhet i forhold til andre religioner. Var riktig oppfattet? Ja.
You see, first of all, I point out that Ahmadis have nothing in common with Baha'is. The Baha'is declare that they have brought a new law and they have chosen a few things from Christianity, a few things from Hinduism and so on, and amalgamated and made a new portion out of older religions. Ahmadis do not believe in this. Ahmadi difference with the rest of the Muslim is a difference of interpretation. The same book, the same word of the Holy Prophet, both we believe are eternal. Yet our interpretation of these differs in some regards with some other Muslim sects, but not in all regards with all the Muslim sects. There are differences held between different sects of Islam much more severe than ours. So this is not the reason why we are persecuted. I'll explain why. The simple reason you can understand is, when Jesus Christ appeared, there were already 72 sects in Judaism. Those 72 sects were not friendly to each other, but they never joined hands against one single sect in Judaism to persecute, to declare it untrue and false and this and that. No holy war or unholy war was waged against any sect in Judaism except Christianity. When Jesus claimed that he is from God, his teaching was as mild as that of the promised Messiah, the founder of the Ahmadiyya community. His interpretation was exactly the same. He said, God does not permit you to take more than your just revenge. God would be more pleased if you forgive. This is exactly the attitude taken by the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, and that is why we call him the promised Messiah, because his attitude within Islam is exactly the attitude of Jesus Christ within Judaism. And all the debates are similar. So instead of taking a long time explaining this and that, this is my short answer. Project yourself back into the history of Christianity. What you find happening there is happening to us today before your eyes.
I spørsmålet så ble det blant annet nevnt noe om Bahai, og kalifen pekte på at egentlig har Ahmadi-muslimer ikke noe felles med Bahai. Den store forskjellen er at Ahmadi-muslimene tror på samme måte som andre muslimer, på Koranen som den siste lovbringende bok, og Muhammed som den siste lovbringende profet. Mens Bahai bryter dette og kommer med en ny lov, eller sier at de gjør det. Så her er det et sentralt skille. Ahmadi-muslimene er muslimer, de tror på Koranen, de tror på profet Muhammed, men de avviker i forhold til andre muslimer, tolkningen av hvordan disse ting skal oppfattes. Og det egentlig er det større avstand mellom mange andre grupper innenfor islam enn det er mellom andre grupper og oss. Imidlertid pekte kalifen på en parallell med situasjonen innenfor jødedommen. På Jesu tid var det, i hvert fall etter et religiøst språkbruk, 72 sekter i jødedommen. Disse 72 sektene gikk aldri, de var uenige om veldig mye, men det var aldri sånn at 71 av dem gikk sammen om å bekjempe en. Men de 72 gikk sammen da Jesus kom og var imot ham. Og kalifen ser på en tilsvarende situasjon for Ahmadi-muslimen nå, hvor alle de andre går mot oss og vår grunnlegger, som han da sammenligner disse når det gjelder lære, mildhet og dette med å tilgi, sammenligner da med Messias, Jesus innenfor kristendom.
Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Umi Monclar. I'm a colleague of Talamid here. I have had immigrant children in my classes for more than 10 years. And my question is practical in this country. And that is, what is going to happen to your immigrant children growing up now? all of you immigrants sitting here are first generation. You're doing well. My experience that only very few of the children. And this is a language problem in this country. And I feel part of that is because of, well, all my immigrant children are Muslims, by the way, except one. Part of that problem, I feel, is that Islam says that the sexes should be apart, which means their mothers don't speak Norwegian. They can't help their children with their schoolwork. Daddy often has 2 jobs. When on earth is he supposed to help his children? Some of the mothers don't even read and write. They are scared of all they watch on the news, on Norwegian television, and what they read in the Norwegian newspapers, or what their husbands read, actually. And they are ignorant of the Norwegian society, and they keep their children away from school when they're supposed to learn about how do mankind, what is it? Yeah, how would you get children, to say it easily. They are kept away from school if we're going for a tour in the forest. They are kept home from school because we're going to swim, etc., etc., etc. And what I fear is, will these children be unemployed? Because they do not practice Norwegian well. They're effectively kept out of the secondary educational system, except for some very clever boys and 1 or 2 occasional girls. This is a problem. What can be done to get mothers into the Norwegian society and make them speak Norwegian and make them able to teach their children, because immigrant children have a hard time in this country. Thank you.
Excuse me, let me first of all very politely disagree with
your assessment. This is not correct. No Ahmadi woman, for the sake of her religion or for any other sake, is discouraged from learning languages. On the contrary, it is the Ahmadiyya community which lays very powerful emphasis on the language of the land where Ahmadis reside. I have repeatedly, for the last so many years, instructed not only the Norwegian Ahmadis, but Ahmadis in 126 countries of the world, that if they go from different lands to different countries, this is their prime responsibility to first of all learn the language very well and get integrated with the society on one condition, that they must employ safety valves. Where there is goodness, it must be permitted to flow into you. Where there are evil influences, they must be stopped. This scientific approach is not a backdated attitude of a people who are living in the past. It is an attitude of a people who want to survive with the best qualities of life. For instance, I tell you what. I have been confronted with this question everywhere in Europe, in America, in Canada. Number one, this assessment can be proved totally wrong, that Ahmadi children are lagging behind in languages of the country where they reside. In teachings, if you want me to produce records, you will be surprised to learn that Ahmadi girls and boys stand first in most of the classes in Germany, in Holland, in America, in Canada, and everybody is surprised why. Why they are outstanding in their educational performances. The reason is the second one which you have quoted. We discourage them from sucking evil from the society around. The evil which has already threatened the society itself. In a society where child abuse has become a common practice, where drug addiction, where abuse by the teachers of their own pupil has become commonplace, where AIDS is threatening the very survival of mankind, where sex-related diseases, sexually transmitted diseases are a common and growing threat. What would you propose? We in Ahmadiyya community have certain set of values. We believe we can give these values to any country, however advanced materially that country be. But we can learn other things. So what I instruct my community and which they follow is, in short, number one, you must learn the language of the country as best as you possibly can. You must integrate with the society in all good things, in all healthy pursuits. Only you should avoid contact where there is a very grave danger to your children to get the evils from the society. For instance, recently a lawsuit was registered in England by an Ahmadi boy who was expelled from the school for committing the crime of not taking bath naked with other boys. He was expelled. The parents came to me and I said he has every right. And the lawyers which were employed, they got my instructions and I told them the reasons. They were so perfectly satisfied that when they served the notice to the school, they withdrew their decision, they apologized and re-entered the boy. I told the lawyer to plead to the court that here is a society where, according to your statistics, in some cities, 1/3 of the homes are seats of child abuse, where according to your statistics, drug addiction is becoming commonplace and completely out of hand, where according to your own assessments, homosexuality has become a large threat to the society as a whole, where even church is giving in and accepting homosexuals as church ministers, where school teachers are known to abuse children homosexually. What would you expect an Ahmadi child to behave, to do? So evil must be prevented. Not in the name of society or any other name shall we permit Ahmadi children to be evilly influenced. But in good values, you have very good values. You are an industrious people. You are a truthful people. You are not hypocritical generally. And I tell Ahmadis to learn all these wonderful values from Norwegians. Again, I tell them to be of service to them, to participate in all social activities where service is needed. Go to the homes of the ill, go to the abandoned parents whose only crime is that they are old age and their children have abandoned them to homes where they are suffering from loneliness. Go to them, meet out and share their misery. Serve the common cause of the people. Cooperate with the police in fighting the crime. These are the things which they are doing. And any police officer who knows this will bear me out that this is correct. So this is our principal attitude, and because I believe I'm absolutely right, so we don't want to change this attitude.
No, that's not my point, because I don't disagree with you on those attitudes. But it is very hard to get hold of immigrant mothers, I must say, and that is the experience of many.
Mothers, if they are not cooperating with you in learning languages, just report the matter to the Amir who is here, because they are doing it against my clear instructions. And when I say instructions, there is no force involved. There is a deep tie of love and understanding between me and all Ahmadis, men, women, children alike. So when they want, they know that there is a wish of mine, not because I can force them. They are automatically forced from within, from their own heart, to follow that wish. So to convey this to all Ahmadi ladies that I am ashamed of hearing this from their attitude. They are not cooperating with people who want to teach them Norwegian, who want to make them understand the problems of society. They should open their doors to
workers, and they should go out to schools to learn the language and other good things. There I fully guarantee my full cooperation and support.
Noor, I believe that she didn't have any complaint about any Ahmadi mother, is it?
No, that's not.
No, this is...
That's something else which he said. We have understood each other very well. Yes. Now, please, translation, if you can now keep up.
Jeg skal oversette meget kort, jeg tror ikke at jeg skal gå i detalj, men selve det generelle problemet som ble reist, det er et problem som er velkjent. Og det merket vi jo også på applausen som kom etter spørsmålet. De som arbeider, de som er lærere, eller de som på andre måter arbeider i nær kontakt med innvandrerungdom, de tror jeg følte seg igjen i det som spørsmålet som ble stilt. Det vi fra Ahmadi-muslimenes side prøver å gjøre, det er å oppmuntre medlemmene til å gå ut i samfunnet. Både de yngre og de eldre, å være aktive. Der må nok jeg si at vi ikke har lykkes i den grad som Odor gjerne skulle ha sett at vi hadde. Men det er helt viktig at hans instruksjoner hele tiden har gått på at lær språket, det nevnte han innledningsvis, lær språket i det land hvor du oppholder deg. Og som en konsekvens av det, så må vi for eksempel da, i moskeen, så skal en del av prekene, eller en del av det som fremføres, skal være på norsk, selv om det bare er innvandrere til stede eventuelt. Så vi prøver veldig bevisst å satse på dette med norskopplæringen her i Norge. Når det gjelder andre ting, så prøver vi da å få medlemmer ut i samfunnet, at de skal delta på forskjellige måter i foreninger, og det å være til nytte og hjelpe dem som har det vanskeligere. Og som et lite eksempel kan jeg nevne at vi har en del som er med når det gjelder natteravnene, for eksempel.
Now the second question from that corner, please.
Farah Sunni Muslim. My question is hypothetical.
Hypothetical?
Yes.
Right.
In the case of Islamic Jihad, I wonder, would the Islamic world include the Ahmadiyyat? And would the Ahmadis like to be included?
In what?
In the Jihad.
In the Jihad?
Yes.
You want to understand?
In the case of Jihad.
Yes. You see...
Yes,
I'm sorry. Yes.
Because as you consider yourself as Muslims and you're discriminated, so how is your solidarity towards the Muslim world?
Question.
Ja, det var et spørsmål som ble understreket, var hypotetisk, vi får holde det. Hvis det blir en jihad, hellig krig, vil da Ahmadi-muslimer bli inkludert? Altså, en jihad, da forventer man at alle muslimene kjemper sammen for det som erklæres som krigens mål. Vil da Ahmadi-muslimer bli inkludert i det fra muslimenes side? Og ønsker Ahmadi-muslimene selv å bli inkludert blant dem som skal kjempe jihad?
You see, the jihad in Ahmadiyyat is understood very differently from the jihad among the orthodox Muslim scholars. The word jihad means to them that God gives license to you to convey your message to others, first politely, but if somebody rejects, then with sword. If somebody agrees with your message, well and good. If he fails to see your point, you can kill him to understand things. Now, how on earth can somebody understand things if he is killed? My slogan is coercion, force, tyranny can bend the heads but not thoughts. It can slit the hearts but cannot convince them. So it's totally illogical, totally meaningless. Then we quote from the Holy Quran And this is where the battle between us and them begins. We say the Holy Quran categorically rejects this view. The concept of jihad as mentioned in the Holy Quran is only a defensive war after long patience of suffering, when the opponent continues to strike at you, to hit you, to attempt to destroy you physically and materially. You go on trying to persuade him for a long time with patience until a time comes you can take it no more. Then you are permitted to defend yourself with the same weapons which the enemy is already using against you. This is the Ahmadi concept of jihad as based on our understanding of the Quran. So in this understanding, any Muslim will be most welcome to join us, and we should be welcome to be joined by all sane Muslims who see this point of view. With the rest, there is no point in cooperating, because their jihad in the name of God is mostly unholy and meaningless and without justification. What was the justification of a holy war of Iraq against Iran and Iran against Iraq? But after this, translation please.
I Kalifens svar han pekte på dette med at det er ulik oppfatning mellom de ortodokse muslimer og Ahmadi-muslimene når det gjelder begrepet jihad. De ortodokse muslimer bruker ordet jihad som hellig krig, som noe de kan gjøre også for tro, etter at de først har prøvd å overbevise folk om religionens sannhet. Og da vil de ikke være med, så slår det der. Så går vi til krig. Kalifen peker på at dette er aldeles meningsløst, og det finnes ikke noen basis for dette i Koranen. Det eneste tilfellet man kan bruke jihad som det riktig forstått, virkelig den hellige krig, det er dersom du selv blir utsatt for angrep, og om igjen prøver å stanse det, og prøver å få motparten til å holde opp, og motparten fremdeles ikke vil gi seg. Og da må du, når alle andre utveier et forsøk, da har du rett til å gripe til samme type våpen som fienden gjør mot deg. Det er rent forsvar, og det er absolutt siste utvei. Dette er Ahmadi-muslimenes oppfatning av ordene slik som de benyttes i Koranen.
Yes,
Well, it's not another question. Jihad was used only as an example. I know the word is being misused. What I really wanted to know is how is the Ahmadiyya's solidarity towards other Muslims? Because the Ahmadis has been discriminated so much. So I wonder what... Sorry, that was Norwegian.
I understand your question, I'll answer.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, because the way you framed your question first time, I was led to the wrong answer. The answer was right, but in the wrong direction, of course.
Spørsmålet var, når nå Ahmadi-muslimene blir utsatt for så alvorlig forfølgelse fra andre muslimer, hvordan er da deres holdning om den? Føler de solidaritet med resten av muslimene?
You see, as far as the Ahmadi attitude is concerned, we always support the just Muslim cause. And where the cause is not just, we show our solidarity from our point of view, whether they accept it or not, by correct advice. In case of Salman Rushdie, for instance, I toured the Western world and also some Eastern countries and told the whole world the correct Islamic attitude. And I requested the Muslim powers to rectify this attitude, otherwise they will be doing double injustice to Islam. First of all, they will be on the receiving end of mockery and laughter, and secondly, people will run away from that Islam which they believe in. So my answer was, Islam condemns insult to any noble human man, strongly condemns, not only to prophets, not only to God, but any decent citizen, but does not condemn such person to death. That is the answer in short. And this is the Islamic attitude. So when I made it clear, a lot of misunderstanding was removed, and a lot of Muslims themselves who were not Ahmadis appreciated that attitude and started to reform their views on this issue. Similarly, on the Gulf, I delivered 26 sermons continuously, or I don't remember, I'm sorry, that was on a different issue. On the Gulf issue, I delivered 17 sermons, some lasting 2 hours, telling the Muslim world of the right attitude. Otherwise, I warned Saddam Hussein, he will not only destroy himself, but also damage the cause of Islam and the Muslim world for a long, long time to come. But he did not take heed. So what can you do if your advice falls on deaf ears? But as far as Ahmadis are concerned, they have never hesitated to rectify the Muslims' attitude and to bring them to the right side. That is the best we can do for them.
Vi støtter alltid muslimer I det vi mener rett og rettferdig, og dersom vi mener at de gjør noe som feil, så sier vi fra, for det også riktig ifølge islam. Han nevnte som eksempel Rushdie-saken, hvor vi gikk ut mot dem som skrev dødsstraff for Rushdie. Vi mente at det han hadde gjort var feilaktig, men det helt feilaktig å kreve dødsstraff for en slik gjerning. Så vi tok sterk avstand fra det, og vi understreker at det gjorde vi også her I Norge, hvor vi sendte ut tusenvis av pamfletter og sendte beskjed til alle aviser og medier. Men igjen, slik ikke så interessant, så derfor kommer vi ikke på trygg. Han nevnte også Gulfkrigen, Gulfkrisen som senere Gulfkrigen, og viste at han hadde holdt 17 lengre prekener hvor han gikk imot, og hvor han pekte på hvor farlig dette kunne være for islam, og hvilke uhyre negative konsekvenser det ville få for lang sikt for islam dersom ikke Saddam Hussein trakk seg tilbake.
Thank you.